Hi, this is Dr Adrian Lopresti. Join us on FX Medicine next week, where we'll be talking to Dr Frank Karl about how to assess and treat people with sleep-related disorders. Subscribe to us on your favourite podcast app and follow us on social media to make sure you never miss an episode. Hi, and welcome to FX Medicine by BioCeuticals, where we bring you the latest in evidence-based integrative, functional, and complementary medicine. FX Medicine by BioCeuticals acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, where we live and work, and the connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Dr Nenad Naumovski is a world-leading researcher in food science and human nutrition at the University of Canberra. He is the author of over 140 peer-reviewed manuscripts and is a founder and team leader of the Functional Foods and Nutrition Research Laboratory at the University of Canberra, where they investigate the effects of functional foods, beverages, and plant bioactives on psychocardiometabolic outcomes, mood, behaviour, and cognitive function. Dr Naumovski has conducted research on a whole range of plants and nutraceuticals, and it's his research on theanine that we wanted to specifically discuss in more detail today. Okay, welcome to FX Medicine, Nenad. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks very much for inviting me, Adrian.
That's no problem at all. I mean, I know certainly you and your team are doing some terrific work on functional foods and plant bioactives. Can you tell us a little bit about the research you're doing at the University of Canberra?
Well, some of the work that we are doing at the University of Canberra includes mainly looking at the development of functional food products, and there are type of products that include different ingredients in order to increase the functionality of them, from obviously looking at health benefits or health effects. An example of a functional food product could be seen as use of the margarine that has been fortified with some of the phytosterols in order to reduce the cholesterol levels, and that is one of the most common examples of the functional food products. We take that a little bit further, and we also try to make sure that the functional food products that we develop actually taste good, look good, have got a longer shelf life, and also exhibit the functionality or do some sort of a physiological responses that are associated with the beneficial health outcomes. During that process, obviously, it involves a number of different steps, and that is identifying the main ingredients as to which ones to go, use of the phytochemicals or plant-based chemicals. We like to use the obviously commercially available chemicals and commercially available products, amino acids, or even some of the extracts, because they are available and they are obviously a use from the commercial perspective for production or for the use on a global market.
Okay, so you mentioned margarine. Are there other foods you typically use?
So in regards to margarine, I have to admit, Adrian, I'll use it as an example of the most common functional food product. But some of the other products that we are actually developing is, for example, a sorbet. We use the mango sorbet as a carrier for some of those ingredients in order to mask the particular types of flavors, but also to extend the shelf life of the active ingredients that has been used in. Another example would be we're currently working on a use of Australian native plants, such as the Davidson plum, and we are combining that again into the sorbet that has got a different carrier. Different carriers have flavor rather than a carrier, such as a blueberry, strawberry, raspberry, and then we are anticipating that incorporating this Davidson plum within the structure, within the food matrix, we would be able to deliver the physiologically relevant concentrations of the active ingredients in order to look into the muscle recovery, but also in improvements in psychological recovery of the athletes. So there are the projects that are upcoming. But at the moment, the main point is to actually use the frozen products that can actually have a longer shelf life and they're relatively easier to maintain their acidity levels, but also to maintain their flavoring additions, because some of these ingredients actually they don't taste very good. They're rather bitter.
Yes, I was going to say, how hard is it to get the taste right?
It usually takes anything from 6 to 9 months to actually get the taste right, and that is one of those main problems, because you might have an active ingredient that you need to incorporate at mega doses, like a couple of grams, to be inserted into the product that is only about 50 or 100 grams. So you're looking about 2 to 5% of the total weight of the product, and those active ingredients that they don't taste really good. So there's a number of different things that we have to do, such as nanoencapsulation or masking the product flavor by using coldness, by using some of the sweeteners. And then when we talk about the sweeteners, you always have to be careful that you don't raise the blood sugar levels, which obviously will negate the whole impact of the product that you're developing.
Wow. And so the ingredients that you've worked with, I know that we, today we're going to talk about theanine, but what other ingredients have you specifically worked with?
We also worked with some of the amino acids. We are currently working on one of the products that may assist with the improvements in physical performance. It's a combination between the two amino acids, citrulline and arginine. So the citrulline is a non-proteinogenic amino acid. It's commonly found in a watermelon. And arginine is obviously one of the amino acids that is essential for the muscle recovery, but also for the production of or the suppression of the reactive oxygen species and the vasodilation. So theoretically, if we can combine these two ingredients and increase the vasodilation, we would be able to deliver more nutrients to the areas that are most commonly using it, such as our very large muscles, and theoretically it would increase the power output of the individuals. The only problem with those things is that when you take those two amino acids in combination, they don't taste that great. I have taken them, speaking out of personal experience, I have taken them at the levels that are needed, and luckily that there was a bathroom very close by, so I could actually get them out as soon as possible. So they don't. They're very slimy and they're very bitter. So it's quite a lot of a challenge to actually master the flavor of these type of ingredients.
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, all the research I do are generally with supplement with capsules and tablets, but functional foods is a fascinating area, and that sounds great. Sounds very interesting and obviously very challenging at times to be able to get the right flavour and combination.
Yeah, thanks very much. It is. It's a good fun. Most of the time it actually works. On the times that it doesn't work, we definitely learn something out of it and try to improve the product. It's one of those challenges that as a food scientist and a nutritionist we commonly come up across, especially when you're trying to develop these type of food products, because not that you only want them to look good, taste good, and have a longer shelf life. You want also to work towards the commercialization of the products and seek if this can actually be pushed outside into the commercial world where people can actually use it and afford it to use it, so they don't require an excessive amount of funds to actually purchase this type of a product. So it's a very interesting part of the research and translation of research into the industry to be at.
So I wanted to talk a bit about theanine, and I know that theanine has recently been approved by the TGA to go into products in Australia. So I suspect that means we'll see a rapid increase of its inclusion in Australian products. And you're doing some research on theanine, which is the main ingredient, as I said, that we wanted to discuss today. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the research you're doing on theanine?
Sure. So what we're doing is, as a team, we are looking at the effects of this type of functional food products on to the psychological and cardiometabolic health outcomes. So we're looking at the development of products that can be used for the management of anxiety, stress, improvements in the quality of sleep, and also that directly relates to the cardiometabolic outcomes, such as potential regulation of appetite, management of blood glucose levels and management of cholesterol levels, as well as they have been main indicators from the metabolic perspective as main markers of the metabolism. So there's quite a lot of work that we have done in the past, and we are still planning on doing in a very soon future, and that includes work from the collaborators in overseas, in Italy in particular, at the University of Ferrara, where they are using the theanine to look on in vitro studies and looking at hypothalamic cell lines and what kind of antioxidant effect this type of a product may have. So there is quite a lot of work, not only in Australia that has been done by our team, but also overseas.
Terrific. And you're doing some clinical trials with it as a functional food, or are you delivering it in supplement form?
We are working as a functional food, obviously, because of the TGA approval to go into the food product using the theanine, and it's in a supplemental form. It's still not advisable to be done only, obviously, from the commercial perspective. We have done some of the clinical trials looking at the functionality of this type of ingredient, mixing it up with a strawberry sorbet. Mixing it up with a mango sorbet, not a strawberry sorbet. It's also just linking back to the conversation about food matrix. What we have actually found out is that just by mixing it with the food matrix, you can actually have a different functionalities of the food product that you are developing. So, for example, we have tried to mix it up with a different fruit bases, strawberry and I've used the blueberry and the raspberry, and we all know that berries are main ingredients and very rich sources of the phytochemicals. But what was really interesting is that we could not extract the theanine back out in the same quantities that we have been putting the theanine in, which means that it effectively binds to something or binds to some sort of a polyphenol, also some sort of a protein within the matrix of the food. And that's the reason why we have selected a mango, because we could have extracted a very high quantities of it, and it did not bound to something. So when we're developing this type of food products, one thing is to say that these food products actually contain the theanine, and another one is to actually look at that bioavailability and activity of the product once it reaches out, so whether we can extract it in a free form or it's actually bound to something and therefore becomes completely unusable.
Gee, that's amazing. So with the trials that you're doing, I know that there's one on sleep that you're doing. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Of course. So the one that we are doing with the sleep, we have just successfully completed only last week that trial. We have recruited the last of the participants, and the aim of this project was to actually develop a self-dissolvable powder, which is a little bit different to what we have been doing before with all of the food products. But this self-dissolvable powder contains the theanine at different concentration levels. And we have been doing a 4-arm parallel study, which means that we have got 1 placebo and then 3 active theanine concentrations. And the participants that were recruited, they had a mild to moderate sleeping difficulties and otherwise healthy. They are not on any of the medications, because obviously with these type of trials we do want to see the effect of the pure product rather than combination with the different medications or pharmaceuticals that participants may be taking. We also, for the participants, we measured out the objective and subjective types of measurements of sleep. So participants had to wear a watch that basically measures out, determines their quality of sleep. They also had to provide the saliva samples night before and first thing in the morning on a particular days, so we could measure out diurnal cortisol and alpha amylase as indicators of stress, and they're directly related to the quality of sleep. They also had to complete a number of different questionnaires and food diaries, so we could control for any potential caffeine intake or excessive caffeine intake. And participants were on a treatment for 2 weeks. And what was really interesting is that theanine has actually shown an improvement in the quality of sleep in nearly all of the groups tested. obviously except the placebo. But we are yet to completely analyze the data and to provide, because as I said, we have just finished the last week, and we still haven't broken the code. But it appears that there is a pattern that the theanine can actually be associated with improvements in the quality of sleep.
And how much theanine were you delivering? What were the different doses?
Well, we used the three different doses. We used 100, 200, and 400 milligrams per dose. Participants only had to consume it about 30 to 45 minutes before going to bed. Obviously, because they have to dissolve that in about 100 to 200 milliliters of water, you didn't want to add the water as a reason for participants to wake up and urinate. So within 1 hour before going to bed, they were required to consume this product. And the good thing about it is that there were no side effects, which is absolutely fantastic. There were no side effects reported. There were no major issues that we could observe with the participants. And as I said, we are yet to analyze the more objective measures like salivary cortisol and salivary amylase. That is in a plan to be done over the next couple of weeks.
Well, and you just did a morning salivary cortisol and amylase. Is that how you did it?
That's right. So we actually did in the evening. They had to collect. They had to collect at least 1 hour to 90 minutes after their meal, and as long as the time has been collected at, I believe it was an 8 p.m. that they had to provide by passive drool or saliva, and then the first thing in the morning when they wake up, and then 45 minutes once they have been woken up. So 3 saliva samples, a pre and a post. So it's a very thorough.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was the sample size?
We had 60 participants, and there were 15 participants per group, which was obviously for these type of studies as a pilot project. That is quite reasonable and statistically powerful to detect any changes. And obviously, as this was the pilot project looking at the quality of sleep, and it's been quite intense, quite demanding from our participants. We also have to think about their perspective too, because they had to come to university a couple of times in our clinics and collect various different types of measurements, such as heart rate variability and their blood pressure. So whenever we are trying to work with these type of projects, we always try to look into the validated and the non-invasive measures of determining any sort of physiological responses.
Terrific. So I suspect we'll probably get results sometime next year. Is that when you think?
Yes. So hopefully by February we will have everything completed and hopefully manuscript submitted for a publication, and then keep on with the promotion of the results and see which way what is basically happening, and see how we can actually improve and build up on the findings that we already have. But at the moment we are still, as I said, trying to analyze the results. The wishful thinking is that for the next year we would be able to do a much larger clinical trial Australia-wide, and hopefully develop a remote way of conducting clinical trials.
Terrific. I'll look forward to the results. Now, that's going to be great. Now, can you tell us a little bit, now, obviously we've been talking about theanine. Now, what is theanine and where is it derived from?
Well, theanine is most commonly found in green tea leaves, and it's obviously from all of the amino acids that have been identified, and we commonly talk about the proteogenic amino acids, the ones that are building up the proteins. Theanine belongs to the class of the amino acids that is a non-proteinogenic, and they are types of amino acids that don't participate in the protein buildup. But it's most commonly found, as I said, in the green tea leaves, and the theanine has actually been one of the highest or the most predominant amino acid in a green tea. And since relatively recently, it has been proposed and associated with a number of health benefits that a consumption of a green tea can actually assist with, such as relaxation, improvements in cognition, improvements in memory, a number of different antioxidant properties, etc. So, it's quite an interesting ingredient.
Yeah. So if I had a cup of green tea, do you know how much theanine I'd be having, the quantity I'd be having in a cup of green tea?
Well, that's a good question, because quite often people ask about that. They would say, I usually have a cup of a green tea, or I would have 2 or 3 cups of a green tea a day, and therefore that means that you might reach the physiologically relevant doses of a theanine. But unfortunately, that is not the case. In order to reach the physiologically relevant doses of a theanine, you would actually require anything from 10 to 15 cups of a green tea a day.
Wow. Okay.
Now, that is quite a lot. I understand that, but it's a very usual or very common for people that live in Asian cultures to actually achieve those levels. And then when we talk about a green tea as well, it all depends on the quality of a tea and what type of a green tea itself you're consuming. So, for example, from Japanese variety of a green teas, they traditionally have got a higher theanine levels because they have got that sweet umami taste. Quite common is that it's not a sweet; it's actually a savory, commonly described, and umami flavor that the Japanese green tea in particular can deliver, and that is directly responsible for the concentration of the theanine. On the other hand, the Chinese varieties of a green tea, they do not have as much of the theanine as what the Japanese would, and they are rather bitter, and that is mainly because of the composition of the catechins that are found in that variety of tea.
Okay. I mean, so obviously you've got the theanine that's in green tea, but also the catechins, and that also may play have a physiological effect in the body too.
Absolutely. And, we can't forget about the caffeine that has been found in some of the teas too. So they can actually also have the combination with the theanine. They can have that relaxation and alertness style of effect.
Now, I know that there's 2 forms of theanine. There's a D and the L, and I suspect you're talking about L-theanine. How are these different, and do they have a different physiological effect in the body?
Well, that's interesting that you point out, because when we talk about a theanine, we always refer to the L-theanine for its physiological act. Now, most of the synthetically derived theanine nowadays, it's actually quite high in L-theanine levels in comparison to the D-theanine. So in the early days when the synthetic derivatization, it was actually nearly a 50-50 mix, but nowadays you can actually get the synthetically derived theanine, that L-theanine, that is up to 100% purity. So we're talking about anything at 98% purity and above. So very, very close to the pharmaceutical range.
Okay. And you're using and it's mainly the L that's in the studies that you're doing?
Yes. So in order to actually show these type of effects, I strongly suggest that L-theanine has shown the most beneficial effects. Okay,
so although we're talking about theanine, we're more specifically talking about L-theanine, and we're just using theanine as a kind of the short version of it, but certainly there. So how does L-theanine work? I mean, what are its mechanisms of action?
Well, mechanisms of action, one of the questions actually that we still are trying to find out is the exact site of absorption of L-theanine. So animal models have shown that L-theanine can be absorbed in the small intestine, like most of the other products, but it can also potentially be absorbed in the oral cavity. So, development, when we look at the development of different products such as self-dissolvable or medication,
lozenges and things like that.
That's right. They are specifically designed for the oral absorption. So we will also, in the future plans, looking to see if the theanine can actually be absorbed in the oral cavity rather than the small intestine, which, again, it's another challenge. But soon after the absorption, the theanine basically is incorporated into the circulatory, into the systemic circulation, and it is distributed to pretty much through all of the tissues. The good thing, or one of the very interesting components, is that once absorbed into the systemic circulation, the theanine can actually pass the blood-brain barrier. And by passing the blood-brain barrier, obviously it can cause a number of different effects onto the neuronal cells, but also on the glial cells. And by doing that, one of the main effects that theanine has actually exhibited is the induction of or development of the alpha waves in the brain. Now, the alpha waves in the brain are commonly associated with relaxation, and it's also there associated with that feeling of alertness without a raise of the heart rate or without a raise of the blood pressure. So it's quite an interesting ingredient, and depending on what you're combining it with, you can potentially produce a different type of effect.
Wow, it's fascinating. So obviously then it has impact on anxiety and stress and things like that. I suspect it probably has some neuroprotective effects.
That's right. It has got a neuroprotective effects, and what the colleagues in Ferrara, actually a very good colleague of mine, Domenico Seggi, he has been doing some of the in vitro analysis using the hypothalamic cell lines, and theanine has actually been one of the best, under quotation marks, one of the best compounds that can cause the neuroprotection in vitro studies in comparison to any other ingredient or any other compound that is found in a green tea. So in comparison to all of the other catechins, green tea has actually, theanine, has actually shown the best neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory responses in this in vitro model. And obviously from the neuroprotective effects, it's very hard to conduct any sort of the animal or human trials to actually look into that. But from the consumption perspective, or from some of the studies that have been previously done in human trials, it has been shown that theanine has got quite a favorable effects and physiological responses.
Well, and I understand some of the research has shown that it has an impact on neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, GABA. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in the brain, the L-theanine can actually induce the release of dopamine, serotonin, glycine, and gamma aminobutyric acid. And it is also a natural analog of a glutamate. And glutamine has been shown to have a very strong affinity for this type of transporter, inhibiting the glutamine uptake and therefore exhibiting excitatory neurotransmission release. So a number of different studies have shown that anything up to 250 milligrams can actually show that the increase in the alpha waves in the brain that I have mentioned earlier, and can actually assist with the states of relaxation.
Wow. And I've seen papers, I've read, obviously reviews on theanine and things like that, and they also talk about, obviously cardiovascular protection and liver and kidney protection and immunoregulatory function. And so it just has an effect on multiple systems in the body.
That's right. So it does have interesting structure from the chemical perspective, and it can actually bind to a number of different tissues or a number of different compounds that are already circulating within the systemic circulation. And by doing that, it can actually cause potentially a beneficial health effect, reduction of cardiovascular disease, and in particular, when people say cardiovascular disease, it's such a massive term because it encompasses, high blood pressure, and theanine has shown to regulate the blood pressure, or actually be a very pressure-lowering type of a compound. It has been also associated with easier management of stress, and that is in stress of daily stressors and even a perception of a stress. So a number of different factors actually are relating to that. Also from the cardiovascular perspective, I believe that there was only even one study that has been looking into the regulation of the appetite.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've mentioned sleep, you've mentioned stress. I've also seen some research maybe has an impact on cognition and attention and potentially ADHD. Do you know much of the research about what's been conducted in that area?
Yeah, so from that perspective, from the cognition perspective, there was a lot of work that has been done on obviously trying to improve the cognition and try to improve the memory and try to improve memory and recognition of different types of patterns. So quite a lot of work is moving towards the improvements in the cognition and improvements in the people that actually do require cognition. So at the moment, I do know that there was a couple of studies in Japan that have been done on people with mild cognitive impairment, and they have been trying to actually assist them with the management of a daily functioning, or even use some of the psychological tests to measure out cognition or to measure out the memory recall, and the theanine has shown a positive effect on that. Obviously, majority of the studies that you're talking about, they're animal models, and in animal models, sometimes we cannot directly translate the things that we are finding in animal models into the human trials. But in this case, it seems that theanine is on a good way and can be seen as a very positive effect. From the ADHD perspective, quite a lot of work has been done on children in particular. When I say quite a lot of work, and we're talking about 3 to 4 studies max. And they have also shown an easier management of ADHD symptoms in this type of a population. That the doses that are quite relatively easy achievable even by a consumption of a green tea. So even a low doses of 50 milligrams, for that you require anything up to 10 cups. They are still manageable, and they can still be actually achieved in these populations, in these clinical population samples.
It'd be interesting, obviously, you're doing the research on sleep, and we know that poor sleep can affect, our general health, our cognition, our memory, our mood. So it'd be interesting to see whether improvements in cognition, for example, are the direct results of the theanine, or because of the improvements in potentially sleep that occur. I wonder whether it's direct or because of improvements in stress and improvements in sleep.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that, I personally believe that, if you're going to manage the stress and cognition and those psychological health outcomes, one of the pivotal points is actually to first improve the quality of sleep, and then all of the other treatments might be a better for the management of stress or for the management of cognition. Because if you can't improve sleep, that becomes one of the regulatory. It's a two-way action. If you don't improve the quality of sleep, you're going to be more stressed, and your perception of the outside environment is going to be much worse than if you have got the better quality of sleep. So targeting the sleep as a first factor with the theanine, I would assume that it would have the cascade type of event to actually improve the factors associated with its consumption, and that could be a direct cause and a relationship with the theanine that it has.
And so you mentioned doses that kind of range from as little as 50 milligrams, and you've gone as high as 400. Is that typically, what's the therapeutic range with regards to theanine?
It's from the therapeutic ranges anything from 50 milligrams, and I think that all the way up to 1 gram that has been consumed in I think the colleagues in Queensland, they have done in a clinical population where they have used around 900 milligrams of the theanine in addition to some of the medication that the participants were on. And it has, obviously they had to be closely monitored and do not advertise a self-administration at any point, especially of these type of compounds. But what I have found out is that a dosing or a step gradient increase in the concentration also allowed the participant to actually have the adaptive response and a better response. And it can range, as I said, anything from 50 to 1 gram, and it has been shown to be quite a safe type of a compound to consume.
Yep.
So, minimal side effects. Standard side effects will include gastrointestinal discomfort. Some people obviously have reported headaches, but that could be due to the blood pressure lowering effect that it might have. And in some cases, at the very high doses, it can cause a bit of a drowsiness as well, I would say.
And given that it kind of goes through the blood-brain barrier, how quickly does it work?
So it works anything from 30 minutes to up to about 90 minutes that people are reported to have this type of effect. And obviously with some of the EEG studies and the production of alpha waves, up to 90 minutes, it has been shown to have that type of effect. It's known to stay in the system up to 24 hours, and after that it gets completely cleared out of the system. So the effects obviously are very very quick.
Yeah.
Well, in comparison to some of the other drugs or some of the other medication that is available, and they don't last very long, which can actually be a good and a bad thing at the same time.
Wow. So could potentially people, if they're feeling a bit stressed, they could have some theanine to help kind of reduce their stress levels?
Absolutely.
Just acutely?
It's one of those things that if you're feeling that you're stressed, if you're feeling that you're a bit overwhelmed with the situation, obviously the consumption of small doses of the theanine, it might actually benefit a number of different ways. One of those things in particular, I'm speaking from my personal experiences, is that I don't like a dentist, and I'm not sure that many people do like going to see a dentist. And I get very, very stressed even a thought about going to a dentist. But prior to actually visiting a dentist, I find it the most stressful part is when you're waiting in the room of the dentist. Prior to actually going to see a dentist, obviously for the health reasons, I consumed the theanine, and I find it easier to cope with that stress of waiting. So it could be, it's N equals 1. It's not something that has been heavily studied, but perception of a stress is much easier managed in these type of cases, I believe. And also, theanine has also shown to actually negate that caffeine effect. So, when you have got quite a lot of high levels of caffeine due to the consumption of a coffee or some of the caffeinated beverages, and you have got heart palpitations, you have got increased heart rate and agitation. In those cases, to actually reduce the heart rate and increase the heart rate variability, which is obviously beneficial for a number of reasons, but also it has actually been shown to provide a calming effect in caffeine-induced anxiety levels. So there is a number of different things from that perspective that can actually be used. And again, from the food product development, again, thinking about how can we actually utilize that. So, for example, the caffeine might give you that focus and concentration and gives you that alertness thing. And by taking the theanine, you might suppress the negative effects of the caffeine that you might have. So it's still yet to be found out on what ratios and how to actually deliver these type of products together in order to have that effect.
Yeah, certainly that is that combination. Obviously, you've mentioned the theanine caffeine combination, and I know that many different supplement companies are also having combination, whether it be theanine with magnesium or other mood-enhancing ingredients such as saffron and things like that. So potentially there's that combination that you could utilise, and it works well with. Sounds like it works well with potentially with other ingredients.
That's correct. And, so on the market, you're going to find the theanine now, particularly in the U.S. And in Japan is obviously one of the leaders in the world from the theanine, not only production, but also from the theanine perspective utilization. And you're going to find a number of different products that the theanine has been incorporated in, and also in combination with some of the other ingredients. I know that in Japan there was even a theanine chewing gum that has been developed. And I have to admit that is probably one of the hardest food products to be made. But what they're doing is the whole activity of chewing has actually been associated with the reduction of anxiety, and therefore by putting the theanine into the chewing gum, it has got an effect of anxiolytic types of properties and reduction of perceived stress as well. So the combination of different ingredients with magnesium, I know that there is a study that has only recently been published only about a couple of months ago that has actually shown that combination of the theanine and magnesium can actually improve the stress and improve the quality of sleep in some cases. There's still largely unexplored opportunities where these amino acids can be utilized and what kind of effects it might have.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, you've mentioned that there's been studies with children, so I suspect it's okay for children to take. Are there any contraindications? Are there people that you would be reluctant to kind of use theanine with?
Well, obviously, whenever we said talking with this type of a population, especially children and pregnant women, because there's not as much work being done with this type of a product, I'll be very hesitant to really provide a theanine to children that don't have any reason for not to have it. I would actually be very hesitant to provide this type of a product to any person that does not have any direct need for actually having that.
Yep.
But the studies have shown in the kids, especially in children that are living with ADHD, that there was no side effects. There was improvements in the sleep quality. There were improvements even in the restless leg syndrome. So quite a lot of, the beneficial effects outweighed any potential side effects that it may have. So from that perspective, the only cautions that I would take is because the theanine is known to actually reduce the blood pressure levels. I would strongly advise that people that are taking the blood pressure lowering medication not to consume that with the theanine. But then again, please consult with your general practitioner because they will definitely know more, or a pharmacist. They will definitely know more than from the clinical perspective as well, and combination with different drugs that this can be taken. Definitely know more than what I would, and I would strongly suggest that.
Yeah, definitely good advice. So, I mean, it's fascinating just the potential of theanine, and obviously there's a lot more research that needs to be conducted on theanine and its efficacy and safety. Obviously, for people that might want to use it more longer term, we need to look at kind of longer trials to see how safe it will be and whether it remains therapeutic if people continue to use it ongoingly. But, the work that you're doing is absolutely fascinating. I love the functional food work that you're doing, which I think has tremendous application in everyday life. So I certainly thank you for the work that you're doing, and I will continue to read your publications as you release them.
Thanks very much, Adrian. I really appreciate your kind words. And it's definitely an interesting topic. And more information to come through in the next couple of years. So thanks very much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. So thank you everyone for listening today. Don't forget that you can find all the show notes, transcripts, and other resources from today's episode on the FX Medicine by BioCeuticals website. I'm Dr Adrian Lopresti, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
This podcast is intended as healthcare practitioner education only, and it is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
Make sure you never miss an FX Medicine episode by subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.